It's a great honor to come here this morning and share some thoughts about the future of a business in which I've spent more than 3 decades. The very first job I had straight out of college, I think to the great disappointment of my parents, was to take a job as a copy boy. I don't know how many of you are even familiar with that term. It sort of shows you the sexism of the business up to that point, that they called them copy boys. I mean, in fact, they were young men and women, but in any event. The copy boy's function was that a reporter would be sitting in a newsroom typing on a typewriter, and they would get to the end of a page and there would be a little sort of sound of a piece of paper being ripped out of the machine, and they would shout, "Copy!" So I'd like to talk today about where we are now, which I believe in the media business is in a very far-reaching transition. The topic today that they asked me to speak about was something called the Postprint Newspaper, but I think it's really more accurate to speak of the Postprint News Organization. We'll talk a little bit about why print is neither dead nor the future. You may recall in that sort of age just a decade ago, the New York Times was making money hand over fist. Every regional newspaper had even better returns. If we were making 20% a year, they were making 30 to 35% a year. Gannett was raking money in like there was no tomorrow. And there was a reason beyond the tech bubble why this was all going so well. Newspapers were a monopoly, a wonderful monopoly from the perspective of those who owned them, charging a very premium price to reach a mass audience. After I left the New York Times in 2002, I went to the Oregonian, a paper in Portland, Oregon, also of some quality and quite reasonably financially successful. And I was surprised to learn, and this is true in almost every newspaper except the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, that fully half of our revenues were coming from the classified ads, 50%. And we had a very kind of simple, elegant attitude, which was, you give us $100 to sell your car, and if you don't like it, you can leave. And it worked. It was the best kind of copy that you could run in a newspaper. Now, within a couple of years of my arrival, it became clear that a gentleman named Craig Newmark was putting an end to that particular bit of journalistic hubris. To people now, the death of the classified ad was an utterly inevitable development. Before the advent of the internet, the newspaper business, as I suggested, was based on exploiting monopoly power at all possible levels. The web arrives, and it is clearly what would be defined from this perspective of the people doing this as a disruptive innovation. That I think many of the things, if not all, that one can expect from technological change don't happen on the timetable that one would expect them. First of all, I do think, and I think this is kind of interesting, print is not as dead as everybody says. I think we will continue to see some print newspapers in the United States for a while to come. It will be something less than ubiquitous and something more than the kind of very niche thing that vinyl records now are. One of the things, of course, is very odd about the newspaper business and very striking to me is that it doesn't really advertise or market itself very well. I was struck by this when I came to the Oregonian, and the first thing we cut in shortly after my arrival, when things began to get bad, was the budget for marketing the product. And I remember saying to one of the people on the business side, this is very odd. We seem to be telling everybody that we believe in advertising, but we're eliminating it. But here's what's not coming back. We are not going to make it with the advertising business model. It is not going to happen. And I think we need to go to AA or something and just sit in a room and say this over and over again. I'm Steve Engelberg. We will not survive with advertising. But 5 years ago, the thought was, okay, we're going to lose classified, we're going to lose display, but online advertising, that will carry us. We know how to sell ads, and ads will be online. And it really didn't turn out that way. What we're really seeing is not structural, and that we've kind of hit a bottom. And right before this recession hit, there was a hope that perhaps that's what we were at. And then this recession hit, and advertising fell 25%. And now, as Bernanke at least suggests, we're coming out of the recession. First quarter this year, we're down an additional 28% quarter on quarter from last year in print and digital advertising. So this is again a structural change. It's not coming back. Can we have a kind of nonprofit journalism model? How might that work? Because remember, as a society, there are a number of things that turn out to be not entirely economically sustainable. Now, ProPublica, which opened its doors in 2008, at the moment has had the sort of good fortune to launch itself as a startup and be entirely supported by philanthropy. Herb and Marion Sandler, the former owners of a savings and loan in California, have generously funded us to the tune of some $10 million a year. And this has allowed us to go out and get a foothold as journalists and think a little bit more long-term about fundraising, which we're now doing. Last year, 10,000 journalists have been laid off. And the small organizations like ours and others are not going to replace that. We have lost the most basic coverage of state houses, city halls, police departments. It is not going to be replaced by us, and sadly, it is not going to be replaced by the blogosphere. I hope that the conversation is picking up some velocity, that there will be a new business model with real revenue sources. I see a future in which journalism can use the web and its tools and crowdsourcing to greater and greater journalistic advantage. And I think there will be a mix of profit and nonprofit models. We are, without any doubt, in a transition. And as my former colleague, Bill Keller, the editor of the New York Times, likes to say, transitions can be very, very ugly.